Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. The over 27,000 Nigerians living in South Africa are presently the target of a strong campaign of xenophobia going on in that country, alongside nationals of other African countries. The Nigeria's National Assembly has been ominously silent about these disturbing events. Shouldn't the National Assembly be helping the president to try to secure the lives and property of Nigerians in South Africa? We are now being joined from our Abuja studio by Eseme Eyiboh, who, among other things, is a former chairman, the House of Representatives Committee on Media and Publicity, chairman, House Committee on Donor Agencies, speaker, Regional Forum of the West African Institute for Financial and Economic Management, 2009 to 2011, and currently chairman, Governing Board, Cross River Basin Development Authority. Honorable Eseme Eyiboh, welcome to the Morning Show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, my colleague's name is Leila. Yes. Okay, good to have you on the program. Well, I mean, in my introduction, I said that the National Assembly has been quiet about what is going on in South Africa, affecting Nigerians living in that country and others from other parts of Africa. But I'm aware that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Gbajabiamila, despite the fact that the National Assembly is still on recess, has written, a long essay expressing concern, and some other lawmakers have also expressed their concern. But isn't the matter of such urgent national importance that it should cause the National Assembly to suspend its recess and reconvene to support the executive arm of government to show indeed that the killing of Nigerians in South Africa is something that is completely unacceptable to all arms of government in Nigeria and to all the people of Nigeria?
Yeah, Ruben, first and foremost, I want to really express my heartfelt sympathy to all of us and families, of course, of the victims of that xenophobic attack in South Africa. But let me quick to add that the issue of the National Assembly not paying serious and strategic importance, to the incident is rather I don't align with that, because it's not all about reconvening. We may not be sure of what is going on at the level of collaboration, constructive collaboration between the executive arm and the legislative arm, because this is not an issue we have to discuss in the streets. I must let you also be aware, as well as I think you do, that the issue of in the South African issue, the unfortunate one for that matter, it has a character of a warfare, and at diplomatic level, you don't go to war with a borrowed army. So you must take strategic decisions, and you must be conscious of the fact of national security and the rest of it. What I'm trying to say here is that you are aware, as well as I do, that recently the federal government sent an envoy to South Africa in this respect, and the foreign affairs have been taking some other strategic steps, in redressing this issue. That is not to mean that the National Assembly is on its own or executive is on its own. It's a collaborative effort. And as they are doing that, we as citizens must also be conscious of the fact that this is a diplomatic issue. Other countries who are neither affected or interested in what is going on are also having series of briefings, from the Foreign Office there, and are also waiting by the side. So whatever action we have to take, we have to be very strategic about it, because the little mistake we may do may be a step into the pit, and that may require several steps to come out of it. So I expect that there has to be a level of caution while engaging, in a lot of diplomatic windows.
So in a case like this, Honourable, then what can we expect the National Assembly to do? Because as the law-abiding and lawmaking body, stroke arm of government, surely they will have a role to play, even if it's not right at the top of the helm of affairs, because this has to be an issue, surely, that does affect our lawmakers, sir.
The point I'm saying here is that, after all, the victims, the Nigerians who are victims, are constituents of one federal constituency or senatorial district or the other. I'm not saying that they shouldn't feel concerned or they're not feeling concerned. But what I'm saying here is that you don't, even if National Assembly want to engage, you know, in legislative responsibilities, primarily, they will only oversight or try to cause the executive to enforce, you know, those laws, of course, those avenues, those windows that are available to Nigeria in the circumstance. And I want to believe very sincerely, you recall that recently the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, you know, came back and had a closed door with Mr. President. I'm not trying to be the spokesperson of the House or representing the executive, but I want to say, as somebody who is very conscious of what is going on and also mindful of the likely backlash that may result from not taking the proper actions. And of course, this action must be so strategic that must incorporate today and the future remedies. Well,
Honorable Eyiboh, I mean, it's good you mentioned again Femi Gbajabiamila. Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila not only held a press conference, as you said, he also visited the president, and he had this long essay describing the attack on foreigners in South Africa as an abomination. But he even said that the House of Representatives is likely to reconvene, even if for only one day, to express his concern at plenary. But we haven't had that same kind of quality response, if I may use that phrase, from the Senate, the other arm of the National Assembly. What will you advise the Senate to do?
Okay, go
because
ahead.
The Senate appears to be quiet in comparison to the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I think the quiet of the Senate may not necessarily mean that inaction, in my own opinion. And I want to say clearly that the National Assembly, I think they are trying to take the strategic decision of waiting to hear the debriefing from the special envoy that went to South Africa and other diplomatic engagements at various windows. So, and when that is put together and maybe they have engagement with the president, that may form part of what they intend to come up in the days ahead. I think we are still in the morning of this incident. It would be proper for us to allow, like I earlier said, various engagement, allowing the diplomatic corridors, you know, to be exhaustive, and while still being timeous. It is important that as citizens, we also help to raise the ante by doing what you are doing quite all right, but also looking at the other side of it. For example, you see political parties who, of course, of the opposing side, saying that the government in power is not doing enough. They need to also come up with alternative measures, alternative suggestions, collaborate with government, because this is all about Nigeria. It's not all about politics. And for us to do this, we are talking about the life of our citizens, the unity of Africa. And of course, you also know that there are some innocent South Africans who will be impacted negatively, whatever will be the outcome of a drastic measure that will be taken, you know, in the circumstance. So I still call for caution. So for Senate, I think I will, however, want to say that we should be patient to see in the days ahead what the Senate is coming out for. And I don't want to procrastinate, but I want to say clearly that I am of the thinking that being a chamber that is dominated by men of pedigree and experience, I think they are doing what they're supposed to do in a circumstance. The outcome of it,
anyway,
rather, will be able to justify what they're doing.
But just to disabuse your mind, it's not that we're targeting the Senate. Indeed, the Senate president also issued a statement.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you are targeting the Senate.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you are targeting the Senate. I'm trying to say what likely would be in the minds of the Senate.
Yeah, the Senate president also indeed made a statement. He issued a statement condemning the attacks. But our concern is that we just thought that, look, this is important enough for the National Assembly to reconvene beyond just issuing press statements. I thought I just need to make that clarification. Leila?
Absolutely. I mean, I still definitely share that viewpoint. I do think the National Assembly should definitely have reconvened over a matter like this. But apart from immigration policy, Honourable, what other sorts of policies can the National Assembly look at when it comes to a problem like this to ensure that we're also, through paper, putting forward our best foot to protect the interests of our citizens, both home and abroad?
Okay, well, I think at the personal level, I also believe that part of the consequences of what we are suffering today, not only in South Africa, the general perception, outside, is a result of poor leadership recruitment process. We need to begin to look at it again, the recruitment of leaders into our national institutions. For example, before the incident of the xenophobic incident, I want to believe that there must have been a Nigerian intelligence agency and other security agencies must have done a lot of demographic intelligence on most of these countries that you have the presence of Nigerians. And the demographic intelligence is not, let me use that word. It is something which is a creation of very strong issues of capacities and, of course, pedigree. And when this is done, the outcome of demographic intelligence will form part and parcel of our national security, which, of course, will put us in a position of being proactive on most of these issues, including the one we have now. It is not an issue. This xenophobic issue has always been there. This is not the first time. It's rather getting worse by the day. Nobody knows what is going to happen in the days ahead. So I think that we should be able to, as institutions of government, our national institutions should be able to recruit, properly speaking, people with capacity who will be able to address and respond proactively to most of these issues challenging us as a nation at all levels, please.
Well, obviously you've been, following the story. But what's your assessment of the response from the South African side to the outrage that has been expressed by other Africans over the xenophobic attacks? Well, but we'll go on a short break. Eseme Eyiboh, then when we return, you can offer us your assessment of the attitude of the South African authorities so far. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us is Honorable Eseme Eyiboh, former chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Media and Publicity. Now, Honorable Eyiboh, before we went on break, I had asked you a question, asking you to, assess the response of the South African authorities. Because in spite of the efforts by Nigeria and other countries to express displeasure, only yesterday, South Africans were still on the streets in Johannesburg, insisting that, foreigners must leave their country. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs of that country, of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, has said that Nigerians in South Africa, being targeted by the xenophobes are criminals, drug traffickers, and human traffickers. But what's your response? What's your assessment?
I want to say it's very unfortunate, the comment of the Foreign Affairs Minister of South Africa and the South African government generally. If you are talking about criminality or drugs, whichever way you want to look at it, that is a failure in governance there. Because I do know that if you have Nigerians who are involved in drug trafficking, the drug corridor is quite large and enormous, that you also have South Africans who are there in the drug corridor. So why are Nigerians the only target? And if you want to look at the other perspective of criminality, why has the issue of the law enforcement in that country, being in slumber? Why are they not rising up to the occasion? Because we are talking about international best practice now in leadership. So what they are exhibiting is a self-pity approach. And that self-pity approach cannot solve the solution, cannot solve the problem. Because at the end of the day, it is my perspective that, one, South Africa as a country has actually enjoyed the benefit of goodwill from all African countries at all times. And for them to take that for granted is most unfortunate. But whatever action they take now would definitely have a backlash, and that will affect the prosperity of that country. And I also want to advise too that I also hear sentiments, so we've done this for South Africans and all of that. Unfortunately, the generation of South Africans who are majority in this xenophobic movement, most of them are not even aware, they never witnessed what we actually sacrifice just to make South Africa free, the freedom that they are enjoying today. They don't even know what an average Nigerian suffered in Nigeria to accommodate South Africans who today are the global leaders. So I want to say that it's most unfortunate, but we must also tread with caution because there are some countries who are very friendly with South Africa and also watching, who may not be as friendly as that with Nigeria. And whatever step we take has to be justifiably so for the action we intend to take. But for South Africa, I can say many days ahead, I think they have suffered and they will continue to suffer from the consequences of the delinquent leadership in governance.
Okay, sir, and I'd like to get your take on something, rather your opinion on this viewpoint that has been going around with regards to the fact that these new xenophobic attacks that have come out are coming in the wake or the light of the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement. And xenophobic attacks are not new. They have been going on in South Africa probably since the end of apartheid. We're looking back to 1994. We also had a huge spur in 2008. And it's being said that the fact that AfCFTA poses a $3.4 trillion economy for Africa is enough reason for anyone or people who may feel threatened to want to break up relationships and ties between the two largest economies on the continent. Therefore, do you think that these attacks, this new wave of attacks, are planned and systematic and just supposed to actually cause the deliberate disempowerment that they are?
Well, I can also say, and very clearly too, and I stand to be corrected, that diplomacy has a character of warfare, and economic is in the heart of diplomacy. You know that Nigeria is the largest market in Africa. We may not have a very strong economy, but we have the largest market, and I stand to be corrected. And to that, because of the size of our market, you definitely will expect some level of betrayals, intrigues, and all manners of things. And you know too well that most of these things cannot take place without, of course, at the background, socio-economic and, of course, political contentions. You know, those things are naturally there. So the issue of free, African free trade, whatever name they want to give to it, whichever policy they want to give to it, it all goes to the issues of citizen diplomacy. That is very key. That's in the heart of it. And of course, the policy that if the Africans, the African Union, or whichever way they want to go about it legitimately, of course, it's going to affect another economic bloc in every circumstance. And so if there's a particular economic bloc that must have been benefiting in the circumstance of that, in the previous circumstance, and now found out that now it's not going to be business as usual, or their freedom, their economic freedom is going to be threatened, or, and manipulations and all of that. There's tendency for you to begin to have, the instigation, of crisis. But like I said earlier, and I want to repeat it again now, that it is very, very important that we must do demographic intelligence so that we understand most of the underpinning circumstances that promote not only this xenophobic attack, but other pending or upcoming issues that will affect us as a nation and as a people.
Well, I like the point you are making about demographic intelligence, but I imagine that the Nigerian government by now should have on the ground in South Africa a fact-finding team to do that and to provide analysis. And I guess this problem having been perennial, there's clearly no lack of ideas about what the root causes are. But what other steps would you recommend that the Nigerian government should take now that the special envoy, Ambassador Abubakar, has returned to give a report to President Buhari? What other measures will you recommend? There are people who are saying Yes, maybe South African assets in Nigeria should be nationalized. Maybe the South African Airways should be stopped from coming to Nigeria. Maybe there should be a restriction on repatriation by South African-related businesses, repatriation of funds, remittances, you know, by South African businesses. And that maybe, in fact, we should just close down our High Commission in South Africa in the meantime.
Well, first, I want to say at the level of economics, I think it would be dangerous. While we are still protecting our citizens, we cannot also end up hurting our citizens. For example, the telecom company, for example, you know, the shopping conglomerate, you know, it's a franchise. So you may have had some Nigerians investing heavily in those areas. And when you're talking about closing it down, or like the incident that happened some days ago in some cities where some of those investments were being touched, I don't really think that's the best thing to do. Now that the special envoy, Ambassador Abubakar, is back, and it will be proper for him to, after debriefing the president, then all agencies of government, especially the security agencies, we now have to look at this briefing and the situation on the ground so that whatever action we take will not have a backlash that will negatively affect us. We must also think about some other Nigerians, you know, in other parts, other cities in South Africa, like Pretoria and the rest of it, who are going into the big-time investment and all of that. They have capital there. And recall, and I want you to also take note, that the issue of reciprocity when it comes to diplomacy, and whatever actions that we take, they will also may want to take that actions in return. So I am thinking that we should be able to go through whatever the ambassador has brought back and debrief the president, then that will be shared on the basis of right and need to know among the agencies and arms of government. After that has been done, then the action that has to be taken must be well thought through before that is done. And it's not something we need to begin to discuss, the strategies to begin to discuss on the streets, because just like we are trying to get to know what is going on there, they're also trying to get to know what's going on here. So it is important in this circumstance to exercise a little bit of care so that we will not end up hurting ourselves the more.
Absolutely, Honorable Eyiboh. We are going to go on a very quick break, and as soon as we're back, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show. Still with us in our Abuja studios is Honorable Eseme Eyiboh, who, amongst other things, is a former chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Media and Publicity, etc. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for staying with us, Honorable. I'd like to take us on to another topical issue. The National Assembly has recently been sued by 3 organizations, SERAP, EIE, and Budget, for the 5 billion or 5.5 billion naira that has been budgeted for cars. And the simple question that they seem to be asking is, what happened to the cars that the 8th National Assembly had, and why couldn't they be passed over? What is your take on this court case that they are now presenting in front of the National Assembly?
Well, I think the actions of SERAP and other organizations is very positive because it has enhanced the expansion, you know, of our legal jurisprudence and also helped to institute probity in governance. But taking it from the other angle, as a former member of the House of Representatives and a key player there in that institution, I can tell you that these vehicles usually and at all times is meant for committee work. Then after 4 years, which is a government policy as a matter of fact, individual has a right of first refusal to buy over those cars. Those cars are assessed and the money will go back, you know, the money will go back to the treasury, the public treasury. So it's not just something you will use after 4 years, you take it away. They will deduct the money from you. So we must take the trouble of understanding what actually has been going on. After 4 years, I repeat, the vehicle is given out to, is put up on the pool, so individual user of that vehicle has a right of first refusal. But that is not to mean that there is nothing wrong in the National Assembly. There is something wrong, of course, and the essence of governance at all times is to improve in our public finance and, of course, financial procedures and regulations. Because without getting those things done, the internment of democracy and, of course, the attendant derivatives can never be achieved if we don't have organizations like SERAP and the rest of them. And that has also bring to question, you know, from the public side, what role have we done? What role have we put in place to be able to check, you know, the leakage, the fundamental leakage we see in governance? That, of course, is reflected in, like I earlier said, the issue of the leadership recruitment process. The moment we begin to appreciate getting people with capacity, people with willingness, people with pedigree, to be able to manage our public finance, to be able to look at the issue of the governance, to be able to rise up to the challenge of globalization, I think we will have taken one step forward.
Well, Eseme Eyiboh, you are chairman of the board of the Cross River Basin Development Authority. And, you know, I see you visiting traditional rulers, holding interactive sessions with stakeholders. But those basin development authorities were set up after it was realized that there was a need for sustainable food production, you know, and need for support to support farmers. And President Buhari has been talking about food sufficiency. He's been talking about food supply, focusing more on agriculture. But many of these river basin development authorities that we have, they don't seem to be really, you know, serving the purpose for which they were originally established. What do you think is the problem? And what have you been doing with the Cross River Basin Development Authority to address the problem?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming out with this perspective. This is wonderful. Of course, for the benefit of, you know, our residual knowledge, you know, it's clear to know that the River Basin Development Authorities Act 1986, as amended, was intended as the River Basin were intended to act as an intervention agency, a vehicle to be able to create a nexus between the human assets and, of course, the material assets. What I'm trying to say, therefore, is that the issue of the surface and underground water resources management, you know, was actually key in the contemplation of government when it was setting up the river basins. And because of the enormous, you know, land title that the river basins, you know, they all have, it became very necessary that you must first and foremost identify first, who are these stakeholders in the river basin catchment? Who are these stakeholders? Because we are talking about land titles, and when you are talking about land titles, you cannot deal in exclusion to the issue of customary rights and all of that, which is quite very key. And so in doing that, you must first and foremost collaborate and create critical stakeholders, like the traditional rulers, you know, like farmers, like cooperative movements, and all of that. That is resource mobilization. So after doing this resource mobilization, we must look at the failure of the previous attempt at resuscitating or making river basins work was largely as a result of the inability of the managers of the agencies at the time it were to now identify the need for agricultural ecology. For example, you will see people buying tractors as a farming implement to go and donate or give it as grants to people in an area who are desirous of fishing implements. You cannot use tractor in Ibron, in Eket, for example. Neither can you now begin to use a fishing implement to give to people in Kano or in Gombe who are dealing on groundnut and beans. So the non-identification of the agricultural ecology became a problem. Now, when you talk about food security and, of course, food sufficiency, within the contemplation of that, you must also incorporate in the issue of value chain management. Because, for example, you go in the evening, you go to a sit-out here in Abuja, you want to buy this point and kill. The man who is running that garden is not the owner of that fish. So what he does is that in the evening, he will go by the roadside, the National Stadium Road, the road leading to Kubwa, and all these roads. He will see those people standing on the road. because they don't have the facilities to preserve, they don't have the facilities to create the value chain, so they're in a hurry to make sure that they sell that fish in the evening. So the people running the garden will go and buy it, maybe at 700 naira. What they spend to serve you with a barbecued fish may not be up to 1,000. But what you are paying at the end of the day is about 4,000 to 5,000. So there's a problem with the value chain. The man who is actually keeping the fish pond, he has nothing in return. So that's why you see most of the farmers are generally very poor. They are not in the cubicle of the economic safety net, you know. So it's important that first and foremost, there has to be the resource mobilization. Then we have to proceed into the issue of the identification of agricultural ecology. Then we now look at what are these things we want to do. Is to me, I stand to be corrected, when I begin to hear they said, oh, they are doing apple in South Africa. They are bringing apple from South Africa to this place. There's something else we can also do here and take it to South Africa. But the issue at all times, we must be able to recruit people who understand, who have pedigree, people who understand the difference between politics and governance, to institute prosperity through various avenues of policies and, of course, implementation in our national institutions.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting perspective, especially what you just said about the value chain. I'd actually never looked at that perspective before. And you mentioned food security, which then reminded me of something that was in the news a couple weeks ago. And this was with regards to the president claiming that Nigeria is actually quite food secure. Hence, there is no more forex for food importations. And of course, this was a huge topic that we were all discussing. But sir, what is your take on that ban of FX for food importations that the president sent a directive to the central bank over?
I think the president's step is well advised and is a very good step to take in the circumstance we find ourselves. You will see often, I'm sure you are aware now that Gary is even imported into this country. You walk into a shop, you see Gary, you know, made in China and all of that. I'm sure you must have seen it. You've seen chips, you've seen even peanuts. If you fly an average airline, I don't want to mention any name, in this country, domestic flights, the juice they will serve you, look at the bottom. You will see one of our neighboring countries' flag made in that country. You will see the neighboring country's flag. You know, that's what you'll be served inside a local airline in Nigeria. But you have pineapple, you have the landmass in Benue Plateau, the landmass in Cross River, Akwa Ibom, the landmass in Ondo and all of that. Is it not to cultivate this? And these things are there because of the lack of value chain. The value chain management is not even there. When we are talking about food security, I must repeat, we have produced so much. There are some places you will go now, as we are talking now, some places you will go now, there's enough of the land. But unfortunately, nobody is interested in real farming anymore. Everybody has migrated to become contractors because they believe that over-invoicing and, of course, taking money, not earning, is becoming on the order of the day because the society has been able to devalue itself by emphasizing on affluence instead of earning money. Because they have done that emphasis, there has now been a competitive measures by virtually majority of our population to be able to acquire wealth and exhibit some unrestrained. Nobody's interested in farming. Cross River Basin Development Authority, for example, now has gone into... Hello?
Go ahead. You were going to say something about Cross River Basin Development Authority.
Yeah, Cross River Basin Development Authority, I can give you, for example, now, at one of its project areas, I've gone into massive reclamation, when I mean massive, I mean massive. You can send somebody to go check that out, so it will not look like it's a television discussion. In Noondem, in Ona, at Abak, in Abak local government. And recently, this present government awarded, approved through the Federal Executive Council, I think 5.6 billion for the revitalization or revamping of the Nkari Dam. What is the import of those infrastructure? It's intended to trigger the opportunity for people to participate in our collective prosperity. And it's not just food security. Food security, fine, fantastic. Food sufficiency, fantastic. But the issue of the value chain must be, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Honorable Eyiboh, well, I mean, we say all politics is local. I know you are from Akwa Ibom. I hope I'm correct. Although you are chairman of the board of the Cross River Development, River Basin Development Authority. Now, all politics is local. And in Akwa Ibom politics, you've been on the side of the PDP before you decided to move from PDP to APC. And I see you have you are serving the APC with even as much passion as you serve the PDP. How you politicians do it, you know, I still can't figure it out yet. But let me ask you, what's your assessment of the Udom Emmanuel administration in Akwa Ibom? You had said he did not deserve a second term. He got it. When you crossed over to the APC, you started attacking your former party. But Udom Emmanuel won the election, won re-election, and he's done you know, another 100 days in office. How do you think he's faring? Do you think there is an improvement in the climate of you know, hate and recriminations in the politics of Akwa Ibom State?
Okay, I want to start from laying the foundation for letting you understand why I left PDP, so that it would not look like when you say you politicians. Of course, PDP, I was part of the beneficiaries of the talent hunting of the PDP, the time it was, okay? And when I left PDP, and of course I stated my reasons, I wrote, it wasn't an election time when they said I lost ticket or there was any benefit I lost. So I left because of the same issue of the leadership recruitment process, which I passionately believe in. And of course, you know, there is no political party in this country that has ideology, as a matter of fact. But they all have manifestos. But the components, the persons, the managers of the political parties, of course, are the people who create the inspiration and the motivation for its membership.
Honorable Eyiboh, unfortunately, I'm so sorry to cut you off, sir. We have run out of time on this segment of the morning show, but thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to have you back soon. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Eseme Eyiboh. I hope we'll have another opportunity for you to respond fully to that question.
Absolutely.